Oh. There. Alrighty, happy Friday, everybody. So today we are going to do a few things. The first thing we're going to do is finish our lecture. There's also a brief assignment we'll do with that about emotions. And then we'll wrap up today by doing a Jeopardy for review, and we'll see how y'all like it. If you're not a big fan, we can come up with something else for the next review. It's just started something that I was like, yeah, okay, this might work. So I'm gonna go ahead and check in the people who are on Zoom, and then I will take attendance for those of you in person, and then we will dive right in. Alrighty, Leah and Deja, Nora, alrighty, Monica, Sarah, and Miriam, and Lauren. I'm getting like the first half of the alphabet. I need to work on the second half. What's that? Yeah, go ahead. If you want, you can like go outside. It's actually a pretty nice day. Yeah, no problem. All right, Akaya, Lyric, Eddie, Onyx, India, Ray. I thought so, but thank you for confirming for me. I'm getting the second half, I swear. Evelyn, Sydney. Sydney's sometimes on Zoom, but not today. No Alex today. Sarah, Melissa is on Zoom. All right, Antoinette today, and Teresa. Okay, I will get there, I promise. Thank you for your patience with my horrible, horrible memory. I can't even blame it. I'm getting older because I've always been this way. So. Alrighty. Oh, thanks, Antoinette. I missed that you were there. So I got you checked in now. Awesome. All right. So first things first, before I forget, go ahead and share screen for our Zoom folks. Just wanted to show you what I did last night, which is, I don't know how helpful this will be now that the exam is take home, but I posted a review sheet. It just kind of goes over the major concepts that'll be covered on the exam itself. So the exam will be a mix of multiple choice, questions that come directly from your Explain It to the Media quizzes, and then like short answers. I think there's some true false too. So it's hopefully not going to be overly burdensome to y'all, but also give you a chance to show me how much you've learned. So that is that. And then we'll go ahead and work on our PowerPoint here. And this is one of the reasons why, even though we probably don't need a full day for review every time I've scheduled a full day for review, just because there are going to be times like this where we need sort of a catch-up day, and we can use this day for that. All right, so we were just about to start talking about theories of emotions. And so we are going to talk about the James Lange theory. And here the idea is you perceive some sort of external stimulus that's going to create an emotion in you. So in this example, they're using a bowl. Maybe you're like trekking through a field. You think everything's great. You look up and there's a bowl and you're wearing something flappy and red, right? Uh-oh. And the idea is your body reacts first. So you get all those things we talked about on Wednesday, all the things of, you know, your heart rate going faster, your breathing rate going faster, things like that. And then your body and your brain kind of catches up and says, oh, I'm feeling scared. And so it's in the James Lange theory, it's the perception of those physiological changes that are believed to lead to the experience of emotion. Now, the Cannon-Bard theory argues that those physiological responses occur simultaneously with the emotional responses. So you see that bull, you're wearing that flapping red cape, you're like, oh shoot, what do I do, right? And so your body kicks into gear, but also your brain immediately recognizes this is the emotion I'm feeling. Obviously, things like this are hard to parse out, right? It's sort of like, how do you determine whether these things are happening this fast or not, right? We're starting to get into brain scan studies and things like that where we can start to parse some of this out. But, you know, right now there have to be theories because a person can't necessarily tell you, yes, my body reacted, 0.025 seconds before my brain, right? We just don't necessarily have the awareness of that. All right, so we know that emotion does activate systems in the brain. So in particular, the limbic system and the amygdala. So what happens is that there are these two different pathways. The main one that we tend to talk about is this one. So the thalamus and the amygdala sort of communicate with each other. And the amygdala is really tied up in a lot of different types of emotion. The thalamus relates to the hypothalamus, which also relates to like hormone secretion throughout the body. And those are going to be, the thalamus is going to sort of activate the sensory cortex. And that is going to be looking at what's around me, what are the cues around me, what am I hearing, what am I smelling, that tells me there's danger or not. And then that's going to feed even more into the amygdala, and you're going to be even experiencing more of that emotion. And then the cerebral hemisphere path looks at which parts of the brain are sort of reacting in which ways. And so one thing I should like backtrack and say for those of you who haven't had a chance to take 101 yet is that our brains are not like right brain, left brain in the way that pop culture says they are, right? Like we're all always using both hemispheres of our brain unless we have like a very rare surgery called a hemispherectomy where they actually take out a whole hemisphere of your brain because of a tumor or something like that. But there are parts of the brain on either side that are specialized for certain things. So for example, our language centers are actually on the left side of our brain, things along those lines. And so what they argue is that the left hemisphere seems to be activated when we're doing approach-related emotions. Approach-related emotions are things like happiness, warmth, right? Caring, things along those lines. And the right hemisphere seems to be more related to those withdrawal-related emotions, fear, disgust, scorn, things along those lines. And this is just a diagram that shows you the actual pathways. So you see a snake, you get that information into your visual thalamus right away. But then it is also passed back here at the back of the brain is your visual cortex. So the visual thalamus is already giving the amygdala some information. And then it's also getting information from the visual cortex that says, hey, there's a snake, we should figure out what to do, right, basically. And certain types of fears, like snakes, like spiders, tigers, things like that, are evolutionary in nature, right? Because there was a time in our history where if you were bit by a poisonous snake, it was just death, no matter what, right? We didn't have anti-venom, right? And you didn't have time to figure out whether or not it was poisonous. You just could have reacted as if it was. Nowadays, unfortunately, things that are more likely to kill us are human-made. Automobile accidents, right, are one of the leading causes of death. Guns, right? But really interestingly, because of sort of this evolutionary pathway, we're less likely to react viscerally to like a car or a gun than we are to something like a snake that in an urban setting, we're much less likely to run into. I should like give you the heads up. Occasionally we do see non-venomous snakes on our campus. They're good. They're rat snakes. They eat the rats and mice so that we don't get those in campus buildings. But occasionally we see them. So what we've sort of come down to as sort of a consensus theory of emotion at this point in time is the two-factor theory of emotion. The idea is that you perceive that external stimulus. Let's go back to our bull in the field. We're wearing a red big coat or something. And it says what you activate immediately is the emotion, is the physiological arousal. Again, your brain, your heart, your breathing, all that good stuff kicking in, but then also labeling. Your cognitive, your thinking saying, this is a bull, it could potentially come after me. I've seen those videos on TikTok of people being gored, it's not pretty, right? I should do something. And the idea is that emotion comes after that. And again, we're still trying to parse through how does all that work and is it in the sequence, but that's essentially sort of the leading theory now, although certainly the other ones are still out there. This is something you'll see portrayed in textbooks, but also sometimes therapists will pull this out in session. Like, what emotion are you experiencing? And this is called the emotion wheel. And it argues that there are 8 primary emotions and that they're sort of across the wheel from each other. And then when you have essentially pairs of emotions in combination, those create more complex emotions in the outer ring. So the inner ring is your basic emotions. So joy being opposite of sadness, acceptance being opposite of disgust, anger and fear, surprise and anticipation. And so then you can see, like, if anticipation and joy combine, then you've got optimism. But if something like sadness and surprise go together, then you've got disappointment. And so you can get, and then obviously you can keep going out and keep getting more complex emotions as well. And so again, this is just one way of looking at this. And this is actually based on research on the cultural universals of emotion. So people might not express or display these emotions in the same way, or even with the same intensity, depth of feeling. But what we see is that there tend to be 7 basic emotions that we see worldwide: sadness, fear, anger, disgust, contempt, happiness, and surprise. Now, if you're a Pixar fan, this may sound vaguely familiar because the research here was actually how they came up with the 5 core emotions in Inside Out. And so you've got sadness, fear, anger, disgust, and happiness. They didn't include contempt or surprise. And this is actually based on the research of many people. The person who consulted on the movie is Paul Ekman, and we'll talk about his research in a couple minutes as well. Alrighty, so now what I want you to do is we have just a very brief assignment thinking about why emotions matter. So here's the tiny URL, or if you go on Blackboard, the link is posted. go ahead and just sort of pair up with somebody, or if you want to do a small group, do a small group. I'll give you about 5 minutes to just sort of chat it through. And folks who are on Zoom, what I will do is put you in some breakout rooms so that you can chat through it together too for a few minutes. And I'll throw this in the link for y'all in the chat. There we go. And yeah, like I said, we'll do 5 minutes. And this is not something you're going to turn in. You're just going to get credit for being here, but it'll allow you to sort of talk through the idea of what things, you know, what is the purpose of emotion. Alrighty, so it's 9:15 on this clock. So go ahead and pull that up. Go ahead and get with some other folks and chat through it. And at about 9:20, we'll get together and talk about what's going on. All right, do folks feel like they need a little more time? Yeah, that's what I figured. There's like, wait, there's like 3 sets of questions. So let's go ahead and plan on doing it till 9:25, so like another 5 minutes. And again, make sure you're chatting it through with your partner. This is more about talking through with each other than, because you're not turning in the worksheet, it's really just for you.
Oh my God. Anxiety, I said for a serious and big game. My partner. I was very confident in myself, but then I was being quiet to myself.
There's 6.5.
All right, to take about one more minute to wrap things up, I'm going to go ahead and bring our breakout room folks back. You can keep talking, that's fine. Alrighty, so we got about 15 seconds before our breakout room folks come back. And then we will chat through this real quick and finish up our PowerPoint and then do our Jeopardy. So, all right, so you had this scenario where you're at a funeral for somebody and you look around and kind of everybody's reacting in their own way. So why do y'all think that people respond differently or have different expressions of emotion in the same situation?
Is that some people may not like to show their emotions to others. I also said if they're younger, they may not understand.
That's possible too. Yeah,
Different situation, so you can wrap it around.
yeah. Yeah, I think that that's such a good point. You know, the other thing is like cultural expression, right? So in some cultures, people literally wail, right, and scream. If anyone did that in the US at like sort of a straight-laced, uh, you know, upper middle class white funeral, people would be like, what's happening, right? And that kind of relates to not showing emotion. But what are some other reasons y'all came up with? And Zoom people, if you want to throw stuff in the chat, feel free. Why someone might not be showing emotion. Yeah. Other thoughts? Yeah. Yeah, it can take you a while to process, right? Other people may have had this experience at my grandmother's funeral. I didn't cry. I didn't cry until like we got to her house later and they were like, okay, which of her jewelry do you want? And that like really sunk into me, like, oh my gosh, she's gone, right? Yeah, and then another thing, which it sounds like y'all are like very caring people, and so didn't think of this, and that's okay. Let's see what we have in the chat. Maybe to prevent bigger emotions from taking over. Yeah, they don't want to lose it. But is, you know, what if you just didn't have a good relationship with that person? Right? There might be times where you don't want to mourn them, but you come sort of out of respect, maybe for your family, your friends, right? If that person was your abuser or estranged from you or something along those lines. Yeah. Why do we show emotions? What is the role of emotions at an event like that? Yeah. Having fun.
Also said like contemplation.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking like disconnecting and come to a realization of they're always thinking of not knowing what to do in that mentality.
Yeah.
That's part of the process.
Mhm. Yeah, so for some people, that outlet of emotion can be really healing, right? And letting yourself process it, and also the closure of it, right? So there was a really unfortunate incident where someone, it was actually the minister of our church, died by suicide. It was just horrifying. She was going through a messy divorce and it was related to that, not to the church, but it still obviously was a huge loss. And when your spiritual leader dies that way, right, it can really lead to a lot of mixed feelings. And like, because it happened over the summer and we traditionally sort of go our own ways in the summer, we didn't have the memorial service until 3 months later. And it just felt like people were like ripping a Band-Aid off every time we had to talk about it, right? It was really hard to not have that closure. Yeah, I think another thing that can happen is sort of the communal support of like someone else is crying, so you're crying, right? And that expression. Alrighty, so who wants to give me examples of when you experienced something really good emotions, a time of great joy?
I said going to the beach with my parents.
Nice. Yeah.
I said committing here, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. No, that's great. Nope, I was pointing to you, so that's awesome. Yay, that makes me happy. And hopefully that joy continues. Yeah, for some people, it might have been winning a certain game in your sport or finding your romantic partner, right? For me, it's probably 2 days, 3 days stand out. I think of it kind of equal. The birth of my daughter, my wedding day, and the day I got footed for my dissertation when I became officially a doctor, right? A lot of people react weird when I tell them that's one of my 3 favorite days, but it's like, dude, I worked hard for that, right? Like, it's a big deal. I was kind of married to grad school for a while. Yeah, how do we show happiness?
Smiling, laughing, talking.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes we cry tears of happiness, right? At my wedding, I remember purposely telling myself not to cry tears of happiness because it was the only time in my life I'd had professional makeup done. And I was like, you will not screw this up. But my husband cried when I walked down the aisle. So yeah, we can definitely cry out of happiness. If it's a group thing, again, like you've won a game or something along those lines, you might be jumping up and down, things along those lines. We might do celebratory things, like go out to a nice dinner or something along those lines, right? And how did showing your happiness influence those around you? How did other people react to your happiness? Yeah.
I said that other people usually feel that energy and that's it.
Yeah. I don't know how many people are Olympic heads like my husband and I are, but we get really into the Olympics every 4 years, and gymnastics is sort of my sport, so we get super into that during the Olympics. And the US team, the men's team, they're not actually always that consistent or good, but they have huge energy. Like, they're always like, let's go. And the Russian team who won the gold medal, they had placed, I think, 3rd in qual. So they rotated with the US guys, and they actually said, we were really happy we were with them because it fed us too. So yeah, it can really give other people your sort of your positive vibes, right? All right, how about when we feel fear and anxiety? How do we feel inside when something is really scary? Yeah, oh my gosh, yeah. Nausea is a big part of it for me when I get really anxious or nervous or scared. Yeah, like literally shake. Yeah, I mean, some people actually have panic attacks, even if you don't have panic disorder where you have them regularly. Like, I forget what the percentage is, but there's a big percentage of adults who at least once in their life will have a panic attack in a serious situation like that. Yeah, oh my gosh. Just, I remember, so I've been deposed once in a legal case. And like, I kept my calm when I was there and I thought I was doing really well. And I left and I had to go like return something at a mall or something. And I was standing in line and it was just like, I realized just like this must have been my parasympathetic nervous system kicking in. I just realized I was drenched in sweat and I felt lightheaded. And I was just like, oh my gosh, right? Yeah, it really affects you. What sort of things, what sort of behaviors do we do when we're feeling afraid like that? Yeah, oh my gosh, yeah. And that could like wreck your nails, wreck your teeth, right? Other people will just really withdraw, right? So in extreme cases, there are people who just won't leave their house if they get really afraid of something, right? But even in that situation, you might like find yourself sort of going into yourself and not talking to the people around you. If it's something like a horror movie, right, you might actually scream and jump, things like that. Or you might get the fight or flight or freeze kicked in, where you either like take off running or, you know, you come out swinging. Or there is a third mechanism, the freeze mechanism, which is like deer in headlights, where some people, when they get scared, they just don't feel like they can do anything. So it's paralyzing. How do you think these fear behaviors help? Why do we do them? Yeah, exactly. It helps us in the situation to get through it, right? And I mean, sometimes it's protective, right? Like we fight or flight to protect ourselves, to protect each other. This is a really goofy story. I don't know why it's coming to my mind, but when I was in middle school, I think, we did like a class camping trip. And one of my friends tried to sneak up and scare us. And I went into like full like fight mode, like pushed him into a ditch and was like, ah, because I didn't know who it was in the moment, right? Like your body just takes over to protect you. Alrighty, so we just have a couple more slides to go through here. Great job thinking things through. And if you haven't figured it out already, you're intelligent people, you might have already figured it out. But the reason I do these assignments and have you all especially relate it to yourselves is that we know that that helps you learn things and remember things if you can relate them to your personal experiences. So emotional intelligence is a sort of extension of this. We can actually learn to regulate our own emotions. And particularly to do that in social situations when it's going to be beneficial, right? There are times when sort of either to be professional or to be supportive of someone else, we might have to kind of regulate our own emotions, not show them outwardly, so that we can accomplish what we need to accomplish. So a big part of emotional intelligence is perceiving emotions in others. Right? Can we detect and decipher what other people are feeling based on their outward emotional expression? And then we try to use emotions, harness our own emotions in the service of thinking and problem solving. So this is something we would do in therapy. It's like, why am I feeling like annoyed in session? Like I feel genuine support towards this client. So why am I feeling this annoyance? So it can help to step back and say, what's going on? And how could that be indicative of like what's going on in the client's life outside the session? Then understanding emotions, starting to comprehend the complex relationships among emotions, like the fact that like if someone's crying, it doesn't necessarily mean they're sad. It could mean they're happy. It could also mean they're mad, right? Like I'm someone who sometimes when I get mad, I cry. And people are like, what's going on? I'm just really pissed off, you know? And then managing emotions. Again, we don't want to stuff them all inside. That's not healthy. But sometimes there are times where we might want to kind of roll with it and then go and express them later. And by doing that, we can influence others. Right, so emotions can be used in detecting deception. So deception cues are not easy to learn how to do, and they can vary from person to person. So if you've ever heard about people's like poker tells, right? When people are lying when they play poker, different people have different tells, and maybe like scratching their nose or something like that. But based on research about emotion, we do know there are certain things that come up over and over. So when there's longer pauses in speech, oftentimes that might indicate the person is having to make stuff up as they go along, right? If they're not gesturing as much as they might usually do, they're trying to sort of hold stuff in. If they're making a lot of errors in their speech, well, you know, like this thing, but no, that thing, right? That might just mean they're kind of thinking on the fly, which if they're telling a story, maybe shouldn't be. Nervous gestures, things that we think of when we think of someone's nervous. Are they jittery? Rhythmic body movements, sort of self-soothing things, like some people will kind of rock. Now, that's not always an indicator of lying. Sometimes that's just self-soothing because maybe they went through something traumatic. They'll blink less oftentimes when they're lying, which is really interesting. Smile less. And so do lie detectors like polygraphs actually work? So the polygraph actually just measures physical arousal. And so if you're just nervous about being hooked up to a polygraph, it can give a false positive that everything you're saying is a lie because you're just nervous about everything you're saying. Congress has actually outlawed using the polygraph in job screening for this reason. And more it's becoming inadmissible in court for this reason. So if anyone's ever seen the movie Ocean's 13, they have like their nerdy tech guy go interview for a job and he has to pass a polygraph. And so they just give him a tack and they put it in his shoe. And when he answers every question, he steps on it. So his physiological response is always the same. And the guy who's doing it is like, you're like really spiky. He's like, I'm just really nervous. I just really want this job, right? So you can fake them. But there was also a really interesting show called Lie to Me on Fox. And this was based on the research by Paul Ekman, who also consulted on Inside Out, on micro expressions. And these are fleeting expressions and nonverbal cues that even if you're the best liar in the world, you usually can't conceal. So I just want to show you a quick little video illustrating some of those principles.
There are 6.5 billion people in the world, but we all look the same when we lie. Dilated pupils, oblique eyebrows, an upturned lip, the smallest line on your face, the slightest body movement. It all tells a story. It may be human nature to lie, but the truth is written all over your face.
So pretty good show. Like most crime shows, you know, sometimes it doesn't make sense, but that's okay. Again, based on training that Ekman has actually given to like the FBI and the CIA. So, alrighty, we got about 10 minutes-ish, 9 minutes-ish to do our Jeopardy. So I tried to come up with nice cheesy category names. So your history, search again for research. Want to keep you motivated. It's just emotions. Who does what? And then studies say. So what I'm going to do is just go down the categories. Anyone can shout out the answer. We're all good there. If people think this would be helpful, I can post this on Blackboard as well. So who founded the first psychology laboratory? I feel like I should have this is William James. Yeah, okay, there we go. Looks like you were, it was actually Wilhelm Wundt, if that's who you were looking up. I'm glad that like myself, I corrected myself, but yes, Wilhelm Wundt. So I'll just click through here. This is when a shaman recites prayers to rid the body of evil spirits. What's that called? They often do this in horror movies. An exorcism, exactly. This is one of the ways we used to treat mental illness. This person founded the school of psychology that looks at function rather than structure. We had our functionalism and we had our structuralism. Yes, you guys got it. Yep. And this person believed the mind is distinct from the body based on animal dissection. It's someone we often associate more with math than psychology. I think, therefore I am. Close. No, a little bit after Socrates. So this was Rene Descartes. So if you remember vaguely from geometry, Cartesian theories of geometry, I think therefore I am. He was also trying to figure out the soul, basically. All right, so this event made psychology more applied due to the demand for assessment and treatment. So this was actually World War II. So after World War II, they figured a lot of people had what they were just calling shell shock back then, essentially PTSD. So psychologists started to do more treatment. And sort of at the beginning of World War II, psychologists were involved in helping screen individuals to see if they were qualified to be soldiers. All right. Which is the method used by psychologists to conduct research. It's a very broad term. But what method? You guys got it. Scientific method, yep. And a type of design where either the researcher, that's supposed to say, geez, or the participant knows if they're getting the treatment. The experimental design, if you're doing something like testing a new pill, for example. Exactly, double blind, awesome. So the participant doesn't know, but also the researcher doesn't know. Length does not imply causation. Yay, that's like if you get one thing out of this class, that's so important. You should have heard, I was listening to, I think it was the Black Information Network. I kind of bounce between that and NPR, depending on who's on commercials, when I'm driving it in the morning. And they were talking about a study that it was like artificial sweeteners. They're like, they cause cancer and heart disease. And it's like, you probably did a correlational study for that, right? So probably not. A type of study that might be done in the aftermath of a major disaster. This would be a type of experiment where we're not going to randomly assign people, but we might go study what happens after this. Yeah, naturalistic. Okay, so a naturalistic study or naturalistic experiment. And this is when we mislead participants about the purpose of a study. What is that called? Actually, the placebo can be part of that, but the overarching term for if essentially if you lie to somebody about the type of study. Deception, yeah. And it's questionable whether or not that's ethical. Alrighty, so what are mental processes that select and direct behavior? And again, think big terms, overarching. The name of the chapter. Motivation, yeah. The 200s, I always try to make them easier and then go up from there.
I have a question. Sorry.
Yeah.
This exam, is it gonna be on 1, 2, or is it on all the chapters we talked?
Yep, but then for the next exam, it's not cumulative, if that makes sense. So this one is 1, 2, and 10, and the next one, I believe, is 11, 12, and 13.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, good question. Motivation that comes from external rewards. Extrinsic, exactly. A disorder where someone binges and purges. Yep, exactly. So this is the level of, I've been looking for you asked the other day about like, how much do we need to know about the eating disorders? Socially learned ways of responding in sexual situations. Close, yeah, it's part of sexual motivation. Exactly, sexual scripts. So these ideas that we get that like you're supposed to act in a certain way in sexual situations. And then this is when your body wants to return to a certain weight. Yeah, exactly, set point, I think they call it set point mechanisms. All right, so we could probably get through a few more here. The ways that people can tell what emotions we are feeling. Yeah, I weirded this weird. Sorry, I don't even know what I was trying to ask. Oh, behavioral expression. Yeah, that was a bad question. I won't ask a question like that on the exam, y'all. Sorry. Emotions that people everywhere can recognize. We just talked about these. Yeah, the basic emotions, cultural or universals, exactly. This is the system that causes your breathing and heart rate to increase. Exactly, sympathetic. And then the parasympathetic brings it back down. And then a theory that says physiological arousal precedes the subjective emotion. Yeah, the James Lang is this one. And then you can name any of the deception cues we just talked about. Yeah, speech errors. Excellent. Okay, so we're out of time. I will go ahead and post this on Blackboard so you can use it to quiz yourselves. There are more questions about like what psychologists do and things like that. So again, this doesn't cover everything I'll have on the exam, but it gives you a little bit of a feel for the type of information I'll be looking for. You too. And again, make sure you come to class on Monday because that's going to be a paper exam I'm going to hand out to you.